What's up, all my movie-loving maniacs? This is your boy Bankful B of the Lassiter Factor, and I am back with a TV review. And today I'm going to talk about X-Men '97, which recently wrapped up its second season. So let's review. Now, I absolutely loved that first season of this X-Men animated series revival. I thought it wasn't just a good revival of a cartoon from the '90s. It was also just, at least to me, good written television, especially for a cartoon. And I think that's part and due is because this movie is essentially growing with its audience. The people that watched this show back in the '90s when it originally aired are watching this show, as well as bringing in some new fans. But I did have some concerns for the season because the show's original creator, Bo DeBayo, he was fired off of this show after the first season for reasons that are unclear to me, and I'm not sure what news to roll with. We don't know who's at fault, but I was still excited for this new season. And to the show's credit, it started off pretty good. It did seem like even without Bo DeMaio not being in the creator's chair, the show would succeed without him. But then as the show went on, it came pretty clear to me that, well, the show, it was still good, but you can clearly tell that the show was just a little bit unfocused because they didn't know how to move forward without Bo DeMaio's writing within the show. But I did like how they premiered the first three episodes first because those first three episodes and even episode four take place back and forth between the past, present, and the future. They wanted to get the filler out of the way before we move forward with the rest of the season. I like how the first episode starts with them in the future. Apocalypse has taken over, but then meanwhile we see Scott and Jean trying to raise a young Cable, and then we see Wolverine, or Logan, I should say. He's still recovering after Magneto ripped all the adamantium out of his body, so he's reduced to bone claws, which I'm sorry, I've never liked. But we get this more feral version of Wolverine because he's leading into his more animalistic instincts. I like in the second episode, it's more focused around the X Force, and then we even get introduced to the X Factor, which is essentially a government sanctioned version of the X Men that's run by the senator lady from the first season, who is somewhat reformed, but she's really not. But in any case, I'm a fan of the X Men, but I know little to nothing about the X Force and the X Factor, so it's cool to see how that pretty much works out through this episode. And then episode 3 and episode 4 takes place within the past, in which Charles and Magneto, they're stuck in the past with Nightcrawler, Rogue, and Beast, and they're around Unsabanur before he becomes Apocalypse. They're in Magneto. He's trying his best to try to diverge Unsabanur away from his evil ways, which goes horribly wrong, which leads to a death that I honestly did not see coming, and that's Unsabanur, now Apocalypse, killing Magneto. And but I did like how he had a moment with Charles, of a moment of reconciliation before it all goes wrong, and he always has those sobering one-liners. That one line where he says, "Perhaps I played the devil so that the sinners can go to the saint." Like, you can always count on Magneto for those one-liners. But Charles Xavier is rightfully distraught about this, and this is a point where I actually thought the show was going to go one way, but then I guess this is a point where Bo DeMaio, he exited this show because I guess he wrote some of the season, but then he got cut off, and so this is the point where the show kind of diverged because I feel like Charles was pretty much going to ride the line of going into Magneto's ways, especially since he was able to go into Magneto's mind at the end of the last season, and so some of Magneto is in Charles's head. I just thought this season was when we was about to see Professor X morally gray, but he didn't go all the way through with it. Now, I like the end credit scene of episode 4 in which Wolverine, he's reunited with Captain America, and then he's getting the band back together to explore the Weapon X. This episode right here, episode 5, is essentially a sequel to Weapon X Lies, a videotape from the original show. I went back and rewatched that episode, as well as the Captain America episode where Logan teams up with him just to prep for this episode. And this is one of my favorite episodes because Wolverine, he got hardly any development in the last season, and to be honest, he kind of does too, but this episode was totally dedicated to him, and I just love what they did with him because he's back in current time. He still has the bone claws, and so he essentially tricks his comrades and friends to enter this area that's infected with these bug creatures just so he can get the adamantium back in his skull. And he essentially lies to him, and Morph, he even calls him out on him. I hope they readdress everything that happened in this episode within the next season. Then the next episode was when Professor X and some of the team, they go to the what's left of Genosha, and they basically reform it and call it the X Corp, in which is not government sanctioned. It's pretty much its own separate entity from Xavier School, and they work from there and try to help others. And even Polaris, who was part of X Factor, joins them. And I like the development they gave her here because I know next to nothing about Polaris other than she is an illegitimate child of Magneto, and I know of the character from the Gifted show that used to air on Fox but got canceled after 2 seasons. So I like that this character gives a little more representation. I even like that they're hinting at a possible relationship between her and Bishop. Hey, go ahead, Bishop. Go ahead and get your green haired queen. Then my next favorite episode is when Graydon Creed, who is the child of both Sabretooth and Mystique, he basically gets put on trial by these other mutants that were on Genosha the day it got blew to shit. But Graydon Creed, he's basically running for president, in which he's trying to outlaw mutants. Little does the public know is that he is the son of mutants, and so he's also the half brother of Nightcrawler and by extension Rogue. But then Nightcrawler is trying to get this man some grace despite his bigotry. I just like how the trial was basically a therapy session for him, because it's like basically his parents made him feel like he wasn't worthy and less than because he wasn't a mutant, and because of that he basically made that his whole persona, trying to prove that mutants are nothing and that humans are the dominant species. And even after Nightcrawler saves him, he's still onto his old ways and does win the election. And I just like how basically everything between him and Nightcrawler ends with Nightcrawler taking him to a mountain after he kills one of the other mutants, and then Nightcrawler just chokes him, telling him like, hey, look, you may not be a mutant, but you are your parents' child. Quick side note, I've always liked Nightcrawler as a character, but this season made me a huge fan of him. Like, Nightcrawler, he is a badass, but he is also a Christian badass. And I'll explain more in a little bit. But then the rest of the season is just tying back into all the Apocalypse stuff. He resurrects Gambit and takes over him and basically turns him into a Apocalypse Gambit hybrid. And so Rogue pretty much goes back to the ruins to try to reverse all this, which she does. She successfully takes the powers of the Celestials, in which, also quick side, I do like how this show is kind of taking some beats from the greater Marvel Cinematic Universe, but it doesn't lean too much into it. It's just sprinkling in here or there, but this is still the same show that we know from the 90s, or at least a remastered and updated version of it. But Kang, he made an appearance. But basically, Rogue is the one to save Gambit from Apocalypse and trap him inside the little thing. But Rogue, she had to make a sacrifice, in which it was Nightcrawler to be the one to make that sacrifice so that her and Gambit could live a happy life together and the rest of the X-Men are saved. And it's kind of like a comparison to Jesus, how he basically died for everyone's sins. As for the stinger for the next season, I do like that Mystique was actually the senator lady running everything, and she might be the one that started the X Factor, and so I can't wait to see her villainous ways in the next season. Overall, I did enjoy this season, but I do think it's a bit of a mixed bag. I think it started off pretty solid, but then it kind of diverged into different directions until it focused up in the very end. And maybe if Bo DeMaio was fully on this season, the show probably would have came out a little bit smoother. But regardless, I still enjoyed this season. I had fun tuning in every Wednesday to see what was going to happen next. I'm going to give Season 2 of X-Men 97 the thumbs up emoji. Thank y'all so much for watching. Have you seen this new season of X-Men 97? If so, tell me what you think in the comment section below. This your boy Thankful B of the Lassiter Factor. Stay safe, wash your hands, peace.